of my favorites. A lot of people also really love this knife. Here's just another real example of like a hunting knife, or more like a skinning knife. It does have a point on it, unlike this one, but the point is curved back, right? So it's less, it's sort of curved back, so it's easier to skin with less likelihood of the tip puncturing the hide. It's also nice and small from the steel one, so as far as the true capability of the knife goes, it is an inferior steel, but it's way less maintenance as far as the rust goes. You can carry it, you don't have to worry about moisture and water. The practicality of it is really nice. Stainless steel, and stainless steel has also come a long way. There's a lot of higher quality stainless steels out there than there used to be. So stainless steel is a pretty nice way to go for an everyday kind of knife. Again, this is more of a show blade, but it's a double-sided dagger. It's a Damascus steel. I really love making knives that have different colored handles. And the reason why I really like that is because I can have different knives, because I want to carry knives all the time. But it's really fun if you really love knives, especially if you make them and you can have as many as you want, to have different colored knives to be able to match whatever outfit it is that you're wearing. So this is a nice blue-handled one. My favorite is this pink-handled blade. And this is actually, kind of a show knife, but it's also a super, super high-quality knife. This is a 1095 steel blade. So it's actually a really high-quality steel. It's well forged, it's well made, which again, it's well tempered, which is more important even than the steel itself. You can see some little like rust spots and things like that on there, because again, when you're using 1090, 1095, rusting is very normal, it's very natural, and it's actually very hard to keep it from happening. You've got to keep polishing it, or you've got to keep oiling it. So if you're going to use a high quality blade like 1090, 1095, you're going to have to keep oiling, you're going to have to keep polishing it. And again, that's why the D2 steel or the stainless steel is going to be really nice, even though it's inferior quality. So this pink blade is really fantastic. I wear it with my pink outfits. I love pink. Again, this knife is really cool. Here's another sort of, really it's just more of a fancy blade, a show blade. Realistically, most people are never going to have to put their life on the line and rely on a blade to save their life. Some people are, and if that's more likely for you, you definitely need to be always carrying a knife like this or like this, because that's what you're going to want to have when that's the case. Otherwise, a knife like this is really cool. It's really fun, it's really enjoyable. It's a piece of art, right? It's a piece of art that you can wear, and it's a piece of art that you can actually use. It's got a really nice holster on here, which has got a button clasp on it. It's made of full grain leather. It's got a little belt strap on there, so you can just, put it on your belt. And it's something that's a conversation piece. It's something you can show off. It's something you can talk about. But it's still practical. You can still open your mail with it. You can still open boxes with it. You can still cut an apple, or cut some food, or cut some fruit. You can still, you can turn all your stuff on the grill with it. Knives have endless uses, and you can't start to really utilize those uses unless you're carrying the knife. So it is still usable. As far as like true survival blade goes, it's a little on the unpractical side, but as far as a carry knife goes, it's really actually quite practical, and for some reasons, way more so practical, because like I said, it's like wearing a piece of art, and it's a conversation piece, it's got a good story. So if you love knives, and they're one of the best investments you can possibly have, why not get some, show blades, some fun art blades that are still practical, usable blades. I mean, I've got all sorts of blades, and there's way more blades even than what I have. I don't own every type of blade that there is, all the types of steels and all the types of metals, and really it's, it's a little bit irrelevant for this stage in the game. This right here is actually a combat use marine blade from Vietnam. A lot of people will consider, this to be like, one of the best types of knives. Again, if you look at the tang, this is not actually a true full tang. The metal does come all the way to the end, but it's not actually as thick as this is here. So it's actually quite inferior to a lot of the other blades I have. It is good, it's a good quality steel, it is well tempered. It's a good shape. It's got a lot of uses. It's a good size. You know, it is a military issue, so obviously it's a very calculated decision. Obviously cost comes into it because they could have spent a little bit extra money and gone and put a full tang in here, but they didn't. And you know, literally there are men, there are soldiers, potentially women as well, that were putting their life on the line for a blade like this. And it just sort of shows you, you know, we've got the biggest military in the world and have for a very long period of time spend more money on the military budget than any country in the world, and yet we're still sending soldiers out with knives that could be way better. We're spending, you know, billions of dollars on fighters, and we're trying to save, you know, $1 or a couple dollars by making, you know, a little tiny small tang blade. And different issues from different times, you know, have different qualities. You know, special ops are going to get a lot better issue knives. Or actually, a lot of times they've got, you know, private stuff that they get themselves. But it's a good knife. I like the knife. It's a good shape. I actually really like the, you know, the little finger guards, the bar, for a lot of reasons on knives. But even though it's a good shape, even though it's a good size, even though it is a high quality steel and it is relatively well crafted and manufactured, it doesn't have a full tang. So I can't really, you know, I can't really say that it's on the higher end of knives. But you know, it's decent. You can get one of these for, you know, 40 or 50 bucks. What do we got here? This is like a sort of like a mini sword, or sort of like a kukri knife. It's really nice. It's kind of like maybe a little machete type thing. It's got all sorts of uses that a smaller blade, you know, like this doesn't have. Obviously, this is probably a little bit more of a show knife than it really is a practical knife. This is actually probably a really good fighting knife because it's relatively long, it's relatively agile, it's very sharp. It is very high quality steel. This is a 1090. You know, high quality, really high quality blade actually. This is an extremely high quality blade. It's a full tang throughout the entirety, so it's actually like a mini sword. But, you know, I would say probably actually fighting purposes would, you know, probably be the best thing. It would be really good for moving stuff on the fire. But this is a very high quality steel, very high quality blade. Realistically, it's probably more of a show blade if anything else in our modern day lives. This is a Kukri, and I really like Kukris. This is, you know, a more modern style, more modern version of Kukris. But I really like the Kukris because it's relatively lightweight, it's relatively agile, but it's got like this big part of the blade here. So what that does is it gives you a lot more chopping power. One, because you've got a bigger mass, but also two, because it's balanced to where the weight is on this end. With a very little amount of effort, with a very little amount of energy, you get a lot of centrifugal force. You get a buildup of force. So it's light down on this end, which allows it to snap through. It's heavy on this end, which actually carries that weight. So you get a mass amount of chopping power for a relatively small amount of weight. It's actually kind of like a machete and a hatchet in one. A hatchet is really good for chopping because you've got the light wood or light metal handle, right? And then you've got the heavy, big hatchet blade. You want to throw those in there? We probably actually need more on this fire. So, a moment. Burning through this smoke here. I don't know if it makes me look more sensitive because I've got teary eyes, or whether it makes me look more badass because I'm not complaining, or maybe both. So I've gone over most of these knives. The Kukri, again, I do really like the Kukri. Another thing I really love about the Kukri is that because this is predominantly the chopping zone right here, you can potentially sharpen this part of the edge right here, and it stays way sharper because you know, this is bigger. It's going to be the strike point for pretty much any type of chopping you're going to do. So you don't need to keep this as sharp because it's more of a big chopping blade. But this, you can keep it real sharp, and because you're not chopping with it, it stays sharp a lot longer. So that's really nice. So you've sort of got like potentially a razor sharp edge for whittling, you know, or cutting. Also because it's curved, it's got a really good cutting power. You know, if you're cutting rope, you're going to get way more cutting power in a curved blade like this than a straight blade like this. So the dynamics of it are really nice. You've got a sharp blade here that's really good for cutting. You've got a big beastie blade which is really good for chopping. And again, if you're like really bushcrafting, if you're really living out in the wilderness, especially long term, having a blade like this versus just having a blade like this is going to completely change your life, because if you've got to cut logs and cut trees with a knife like this, I mean, you can do it, right, but it's going to take a really long time. When you have a blade like this, it's relatively quick. So you've got the sharp edge, you've got the cutting, the cutting power. You can cut logs, whether it's for making shelters or fire. And then it's also got a point. And the point you can either keep super sharp or keep it more on the rounded, duller end. But the points are super useful for all sorts of things. Stabbing, if you're talking about some sort of a hunting or fighting weapon. But all sorts of, you can drill little tiny holes. You can poke things. Having a point is super nice. So it's really got all these different aspects to it. A machete or a tomahawk, again, is really nice. But you don't have this aspect to it, and you also don't have this aspect to it. Machetes are also potentially nice, but you don't have this aspect to it. It's very dynamic blade. I really like them. It's not really that good for throwing. Obviously, you throw it, it's still going to hurt whatever you hit, but throwing is not its specialty. A tomahawk or something like that is actually really good for throwing, and that's one of the arguments that someone would make for being able to carry that.